Hello, everyone, and welcome. Very well welcome to this session of the European Climate Pact Action Academy. This is a deep dive on youth leading the way to COP, and it's the second part of our youth leadership course. My name is Chiara Savina. I'm part of the European Climate Pact Secretariat, and I will be your moderator for today. We are very delighted to have you join us as we explore the crucial role of youth leadership in climate action, especially in the lead up to COP. But before we get started, I actually would like to remind you a few housekeeping points. And thanks a lot to my colleague May, who's in charge of changing the slides. So thanks, May, for going to the next one, indeed. And just like a quick reminder of a couple of rules. So first of all, we have Slido for your question, that we will have the Q&A function. So this will be open throughout the whole session. So we kindly ask you to indeed submit your questions to the speakers using the Q&A function of Slido. This meeting is also being recorded, and all materials will also shared afterwards together with the recording as well. So we can move on, because before we dive into the topic of today's session, I actually wanted to quickly introduce you to the European Climate Pact. The Pact is an initiative which was created under the European Green Deal, which brings people, communities, and organizations together to help the EU reach its climate neutrality goal by 2050. It's a really vibrant community where you can learn, connect, and take also meaningful climate action. You will find resources such as our citizen engagement quick start tools, events in all the EU member states and also at European level, and also opportunities to become a Climate Pact ambassadors or a partner organization, and to join activities across all EU member states. But before indeed we really go into the topic as well, we also want to ask you a couple of questions to kickstart indeed the session. So we have two questions for you. First one, we invite you indeed to join Slido, and you can do that by using your phone and indeed look at the QR codes there, or also going on the website, and you can use the hashtag that you see indeed below as a code to join. And the first question that we want to ask you is indeed on a scale to 1 to 5, so you can indeed give a grade. How familiar are you with the COP? Indeed, from 1 not being familiar at all to 5 being very, very familiar. And I see quite some answer already coming in, which is great. And the average score is now more than 3.7. So that means that indeed our audience today is quite familiar with COP, which is great to know. But we will have more indeed details in moving forward. So that's good, because you will learn more about COP. It's a good, indeed, it's a good range that we have here. Indeed, 3.3. I see more answer coming in. That's great. Let's move ahead. We have another question for you. This time it will be appearing in a word cloud. And we would like to ask you actually, which topics do you think are or should be most important to address at COP30? Indeed. So I see some people already typing. As I mentioned before, you can join the Slido through the website or by scanning the QR codes here on the left. Okay, I see some answers already popping in. That's great. So we have energy being the biggest one, but also phasing out fossil fuels, of course, is very much connected. Adaptation, also a very important topic here, but there is a lot also of other things. Mental health, also a very important topic, especially when talking about indeed climate action. Mitigation, adaptation, indeed, these two are, yeah, they come very well nicely together. But yeah, a lot of other topics actually. See also youth engagement, finance, climate justice, just transition, tourism as well, and food. So there is a lot that needs to be discussed, indeed. But that's great. It's very good to have your inputs also for that. So I think we can close now the slide. Thanks a lot for all your answers. This was lovely. And I would like to indeed quickly walk you through today's agenda and also our speakers. So we will begin with a presentation from Samira Ben Ali, a climate justice lawyer and advocate, who will share her experience as a European Economic and Social Committee youth delegate at COP. Then we will have Léa Weimann, climate change law specialist and founder of the Legal Wednesday newsletter, who will talk about the outcomes of the recent youth dialogue with Commissioner Hoekstra, which was held on October the 27th. So with that, I'm pleased to give the floor to Samira. Samira, if you can turn on your camera and indeed come to the screen, that would be fantastic. Yes, I see you. And the floor is yours, Samira.
Thank you so much for giving me the floor and also for the invitation. I really thank the European Climate Pact, especially because now that we're diving into COP, it's really important that us as young people, we mobilize. I think that we really are pushing our states a lot and keep on keeping them accountable. So it's really important for us to coordinate before that and have the knowledge necessary. So yeah, my presentation will be general. I will try to touch as much as possible on the limited time that we have, but I'm also happy to reach out to people afterwards if you want more information. Then on the first topic that I wanted to mention next will be on the key facts that are around COP. I saw that a lot of you actually already have a certain level of knowledge on COP, but some of you also mentioned that you have limited amount of it. So it's always good to start with some of the important key knowledge. The first important fact, I think, is on what is COP. Basically, COPs are conferences of parties where states meet every year to try to negotiate climate ambitious policies. That has been done since 30 years now. This is the 30 COP, apart from 2020 during COVID, where it was not possible for states to meet. They met every year on the ground in the country. And since inception, this has been a really important momentum for climate action. And in particular, also since 10 years ago, when we had the Paris Agreement, who has really has done a lot in terms of implementation of those climate ambitious policies. This year in particular, this COP will be happening in Belém in Brazil. And that is also a big point of the implementation phase of the Paris Agreement, because we'll be mostly talking about national determined contributions. A few interesting facts that you must know. I think for this particular COP, as I was mentioned, we'll be talking about national determined contribution, which are basically some of the states' engagement to try to reach the objectives of the Paris Agreement of limiting, one of the main one being limiting global warming to 1.5, and they are asked every 5 years to give us their plan basically for that. So far, since this morning when I went to check, only 72 countries had done so out of the 194 that must do it. And the deadline was in September. And from that deadline, which had only 64 countries report, the Secretariat of the UNFCCC has made a national determined contribution synthesis report. And this one is showing something that is quite alarming, that we are not on track to keep with the 1.5 pathway, where basically now we're seeing that instead of the 43% emission reduction that we must have with those nationally determined contributions, we only have 2.6%. And also, maybe some of you have seen, but yesterday the EU has also shared some of the intents that they have also for the national determined contribution, and those also are quite worrisome in terms that they fall short for that objective. We're still really fossil fuel dependent, and countries from the G7 are spending billions on fossil subsidies, and that also is keeping us out of the track. And we have bridged already some of the few critical tipping points. There is no, as you may already have seen, the global tipping point report that has come out this year, which has gave us few alarming points on the ice sheet collapse, also on the coral reef loss. A lot of articles were written about that this year, saying that we are most likely on a pathway that is really not good and maybe irreversible. And the Amazon dieback also is something to take into account. So things are really important for us to take action right now and be really ambitious for this COP and the following ones. For the next slide, I would like to mention some of the key points that will be discussed during this COP. As I mentioned, national determined contribution are a really important part of it. We'll also keep on discussing climate finance, which is a quite controversial point in terms of first deciding what does that mean, climate finance within the UNFCCC. The definition must still be discussed, but also how are we going to finance countries that need most of it. Will also be, adaptation is also an important key topic for this COP, especially we have a conversation ongoing on how to make sure that we have good indicators for adaptations, and negotiation are being put on that, and also means of implementations, especially for the countries who need it the most. The gender action plan is another key point for this particular COP. Loss and damage, we are reviewing reports from the main mechanism on loss and damage this year, and that will be something that will be of key importance as more and more we're seeing the impact of climate change, and that we need to address them, not only the financial costs, but all that comes around it that is non-financial. So, and I think that another point that I think is really interesting, because I've been working on that for quite a long time, is the International Court and the International Court of Justice Advisory Opinion on Climate, which is, in my opinion, a kind of a game changer, because that court clarified what are the obligations of states in regards to climate change. And in particular, they mentioned the UNFCCC, the Paris Agreement, and the NDCs within that, where they mentioned that states have obligations to limit the global warming to 1.5. That is the red line. And not doing so is actually a breach of their international obligation, so a wrongful act that could lead to consequences. So we can take that document within the negotiations. And now I would like to share more about my role as a youth delegate for that particular process. So I'm a youth delegate for the European Industrial Committee, and basically how I try to support and help for COP is first by doing consultations, which I've done for a lot of youth NGOs across Europe throughout the year since I started my mandate in April this year. And basically on a monthly basis, I reach out to a few relevant youth organizations on the particular topic that the ESC has decided to discuss. So for example, if it's on adaptation, then I reach out to youth organizations related to that who are working on that. And then I gather the priorities and try to transfer them to the ESC, which then will report to the Commission or other relevant actors on that particular topic within the European Union. I also participate in relevant conversation from the European Union, for example, recently, and my colleague Léa will talk about this more deeply, but we had the policy dialogue where youth were invited to discuss with policymakers from the EU, especially the DG Climat and share the youth perspective on topic related to COP. So that is something that I try to do. A representation in general within youth organizations or that are talking about climate and environment is another important point, and trying to really bridge that gap between those two mandates. And what are the youth demands that I've mostly got? So I think that a lot of you are already part of this. You know how important for us it is to bridge the 1 point to bridge the ambition gap, to make sure that what we need to do to act and not go over the red line that is 1.5 degree, which is now has been really clearly mentioned within the international, that this is a red line, and that we must make sure that our countries are staying and taking all action necessary to stay within that. And that also implies fossil fuels, phasing out of fossil fuels, basically, and trying to do that in a way that is fair and just to the most vulnerable. And that were the most important points that I've been seeing or coming across with the youth negotiators or youth activities that I've met this year. And you can also see that in the different reports that are, I think, really relevant for you if you want to delve deeper into the subjects, whether it's the Yongo Global Youth Statement that has been out now, and it sees on their website, or you can just reach out to their secretariat, or if you want, there is a WhatsApp group, I can share it in the chat later on, where you can try to ask for that. There's also a kind of informal network of European youth NGO working on the environment that is called NECA. And that particular group also always make demands for each COP to try to meet with the different European delegation and try to push for ambition. And that were also the most important points. The ESC Youth Task Force also, which is basically the consultation that I try to lead on a monthly basis. Even if we go more into details, those were the main messages, and the youth dialogue also with the Commissioner Hoekstra. And now how you could get involved. So I know that COP are really hard to access, especially for us as a young person, even if this is my third COP, but every year it's really, really hard. In terms of badge and funding, the only thing that I can say is to prepare really in advance. And what I mean by that is maybe even 1 year before trying to prepare for the next one. Trying to identify, there is on the website of the university, there is a list of accredited NGOs, organization to the university, trying to reach out to them. That's mostly what youth activists do, coldly reaching out, or if you know any partners that could help you, or reach out to your countries, especially the focal point of your country. You can find that within the university website also, the focal point of your country, and reaching out for a badge. In terms of funding, that is also a lot of preparation that you need to do in advance. There is more and more youth delegate programs all across the globe. And that you could try to see, or if every year they recruit, it is quite competitive, but it is still worth it. Personally, I didn't even think that I would get accepted into this, but I still tried and was really surprised and grateful for that. When you are at COP, also, I think you need to be prepared and be really intentional on what you want to do. There's a lot of different topics being discussed. So being able to choose what is one or two focus that you want to have, an outcome that you want to have personally before going is extremely important. And for that, also being able to be connected with the relevant other youth. I think that is building that community is extremely important. I would always advise people to start with maybe Yongo. It's a big organization, but they can really help you because they have like a good understanding of what is happening all across the board. And basically Yongo, I forgot to explain it, but it is the youth constituency of the UNFCCC, and they do spokes, and they have a WhatsApp, and they have a pavilion also that they help facilitate, and they facilitate bilaterals with negotiators and negotiation topics. So that is a good way to start. And outside of COP, online participation is also possible. You can ask for an online badge. Trying to amplify as much as possible to hold the relevant actor accountable for their action, sharing about your personal stories. I think we all now have personal stories related to climate impacts. So making sure that people see the human factor to that is always important. And that is part of storytelling. And I think that is extremely relevant, or at least in all the campaigns that I've done so far, it has always done that thing where we can bridge the gap between each other and find community within that. We also coldly reaching out to policymakers. If you can find an email, reach out to them with a list of demands of active things that they can put in place, and getting involved in the youth climate group is also a good way to start. Be a volunteer somewhere. That's, I think, how all of us started, by volunteering somewhere and trying to do as much impact locally or at another scale as possible. It is quite general, but happy to talk more about this later on. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Samira. It's very inspiring to hear everything that you do, and also thanks also for sharing tips for others how they can get involved. So very, very nice. But we will come back to you indeed in the Q&A session. I would also like to remind everyone to please continue to submit your questions so that indeed we can have a nice Q&A with Samira. And of course, Léa, who's our next speaker. So Léa, I see you have the camera on. Thanks a lot. I will leave the floor to you, and you will indeed share with us your reflection on indeed the youth dialogue that you have with the Commissioner Hoekstra. So Léa, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you everyone who's tuning in today to listen to us and to listen to sort of some of the experiences, some of the ways to get involved, to help push for action. Yeah, I'm going to build a little bit on what Samira talked about in terms of the reflections from the youth dialogue, a little bit about my own experiences at COP, and maybe any additional tips what to build on, and how you can be involved either on the ground but also from afar. So yeah, a little bit about me. I'm a PhD researcher in international environmental law at the University of Cambridge, and I also co-lead Youth for Ecocide Law, branch of Stop Ecocide International, as well as being a European Climate Pact Ambassador. And I've been with various NGOs to international conferences on climate, including like two of the COPs, COP27, COP28, but also other ones such as Stockholm +50 and this year the UN Ocean Conference. I want to talk a little bit about the pre-COP dialogue that we had last week. It already feels so long ago, but last week, Monday, with Samira and 11 others. And then, yeah, share a little bit of insights on how you can get involved in some, previous experiences. So, speaking about the setting and the youth dialogue, so we were 13 participants, sort of linked to the European Climate Pact and youth networks, that met with Commissioner Hoekstra at the European Commission to inform the Commission's approach to COP30, to bring youth perspectives to the discussion, to raise our voices, ask our questions. And yeah, it was hosted by DG Klima and the Commissioner Hoekstra on the 27th. And yeah, so I know Samira already mentioned some of the points that we brought up, especially the 1.5 degree, but I think there's a lot of points that were mentioned, including some of those that you also put into the poll earlier this webinar. So yeah, going a little bit into the next slide, going a little bit into the key points. So talking about climate ambition, national determined contribution. National determined contributions are actually every country under the UNFCCC that has signed the Paris Agreement has to submit those. So that is an obligation, under international environmental law. And the obligation not necessarily in terms of what exactly is in there, but they have to be submitted, and technically they have to be ratcheted up, so they have to be more ambitious than the previous one. And of course now for COP30, there's the ones that have to be submitted. Is quite interesting because it's 10 years since the Paris Agreement, but also because actually we're moving sort of into an implementation phase. The Paris Agreement rule book is set. The main points have already been negotiated, have finished the last sort of articles and setups. So it's interesting because we're moving into this implementation phase that Paris Agreement has set out in terms of NDCs, in terms of moving towards taking global stock takes and things like that, which already happened The first one happened at COP27, where countries sort of had to look what is the progress since Paris. And it's really important because we're reaching a lot of critical points with regards to 1.5 degrees. So as of yesterday, the European Union has submitted its NDC, but when we had the dialogue, it was not yet submitted. So of course, that was one of the points that we raised to urge sort of a strengthened NDC that remains compatible with 1.5 degrees and also with international law. As Samira said, a lot of us also brought up the ICJ, the International Court of Justice advisory opinion, but also the Inter-American Court of Human Rights advisory opinion, both of which came out this summer, giving a strong legal backbone to our climate regime, saying that the Paris Agreement, the 1.5 degree, is, it's law. That's what has to be followed. Countries have to take actions, and fossil fuels have to be phased out. So this really gives a legal backing to climate action, and is an opportunity for countries and coalitions that are ambitious to push for global action, to say, look, there's an international court that says that is also what, the request for an advisory opinion was put forward by states at the UNGA. So it is a request that was forward by countries overall. And it's not about making new law, it's about setting, well, this is already what's in law, and clarifying, because there's a lot of, the climate regime can be quite complex. There's a lot of environmental laws, and it can be unclear which ones are really set. So this gives some insights into what is there and what is the legal background that we have. And there's also, a point of accountability. As said, I work with Youth for Ecocide Law, but it's really important to recognize that large-scale irreversible destruction should be treated as a serious crime, especially now that we're reaching, tipping points, and that fossil fuel projects are still going ahead, even though we know through the advisory opinions, but also through so many scientific reports, that just can't happen anymore. And and also acknowledging the EU's leadership through its Environmental Crimes Directive, which also mentions already environmental mass destruction, and pushing for sort of upholding that and using those tools that are already set to push for action. Another, I think, important point that was brought up and that we talked a lot about is looking at youth inclusion, at intergenerational justice, emphasizing and recognizing the importance of institutionalized youth participation and consultation in decision-making processes. Having these dialogues is really important, but also looking at how do we make them accessible going forward in the future? How do we look at better engagement across young people? So these are some of the points we raised. Of course, also the 1.5 degrees, that's already what Samira touched on, and quite a few other points in terms of how do we also protect children, because youth is one point, but those under 18, those that in many countries cannot vote or don't have easy access, is even harder, I think, if you're under 18 to attend COPs or to be represented in these spaces. So how do we make how do we include voices and concerns of children, especially considering the disproportionate impact on especially the young that the climate crisis has, that environmental pollution has, air quality has. So happy to answer any more questions on key points that we've raised, but let's move to the next slide to talk a little bit about what are the opportunities for raising ambition. When I wrote the slide, of course, the NDC isn't out yet, so the EU was updating its NDC ahead of COP30. I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done on that in terms of actually making sure that it aligns with 1.5. Of course, globally, we're in a very difficult political situation, and I think it's really important that the European Union stays a stronghold for climate action, for rule of law, for democracy, to say that this is our basis of life, our Earth, and that we have to give stronger backing to and have to move forward to in order to protect, the lives of so many, but also the economy and the jobs, because that's really connected to environment. There's no jobs, there's no health on a planet that is that's dying, that is being destroyed. So yeah, there's an opportunity there to increase ambition, but also an opportunity to integrate the legal findings from the ICJ into climate policy, into NDCs, into statements, to use that legal backing to push for global support for ambition that is aligned with 1.5, and to reaffirm commitment to climate justice and the rule of law at COP30. We need to see a push for sort of a coal phase out and oil and gas phase down by 2030, and EU-backed international public finance for fossil fuels, sort of in line with the Glasgow statement. That's really important because as long as there's money behind fossil fuels and fossil fuel projects, we cannot move in the way that we want to in terms of actually phasing out fossil fuels. Yes, we can increase renewables, but as long as there's money in fossil fuels, we continue to raise our emissions on that upwards trajectory. And then, of course, there's an opportunity to work with youth networks and civil society to co-design and implement climate accountable mechanisms, the European Green Deal, the Environmental Crimes Directive, the ICJ, and so many other measures that we can work towards. So I think this dialogue really raised what are the opportunities for action that the European Union can take at COP, but also beyond, looking forward. So yeah, moving quickly through this, but of course you can have it if you have any more questions on points specifically raised. I think there's it will be interesting to see what now the EU will take forward. What are the arguments that will be raised at COP, and how can we sort of ensure that that guardrail comes up, especially when we have more climate lacking, climate ambition lacking globally, and countries and leaders are lacking behind in actually putting this forward. So I wanted to very briefly touch on some experiences from previous COP. As I said at the beginning, I had the opportunity to go as an observer with NGOs to COPs. Something that might be interesting to mention if you're really interested in this process and being involved is that there's obviously different tiers. There's the country level delegates, there's sort of the pink badges, and you have a lot more access, a lot of voice in terms of actually pushing what your country could say. And then you have observer badges, and then also media badges. But observer badges, you can go pretty much into all of the negotiations that are there, that are happening. So you have the ability to be there, but there's a limited way in terms of what you can actually say at those meetings. And that can, I think, sometimes be frustrating, especially as young people. But there is a huge opportunity in terms of that. Over the last years, how much more youth are present and showing that we are watching the process, we are there. For most of these conferences that I've been to, I've been working on a specific campaign to advocate for the criminalisation of mass environmental destruction, also known as ecocide, because currently mass destruction of nature is not illegal. And while it is becoming increasingly unacceptable, that also needs to be reflected in legislation. Mass environmental destruction, climate change, and biodiversity are all interconnected issues, and they need to be addressed coherently. And I think it's really important to see how, a lot of the media focus is on COPs, on the climate conferences, but actually there's also a lot of other conferences happening that are also under the name COP. If you see that, maybe sometimes it's confusing. There's a biodiversity COP that has a different number because it's a big meeting. It meets less regularly. It meets by every 2 years. Instead of every year, instead of the climate COPs. And I think this is really interesting to see what are the different media attention and global attention that COPs get, also in terms of oceans, and how can we make sure that there's an interconnected action both in terms of climate and emissions, but also in protecting nature, in looking for nature-based solutions, in ensuring that there's no further irreversible destruction happening. And another role that I've had at COPs is to report what is happening and to put pressure on decision makers that are there to try and speak to country delegates that are sort of moving through the corridors, through the venue, having those dialogues with country groupings as well, and using social media to inform people that are not present at COP about what's happening, what can be done, how they can push for action. And that brings me quite nicely to sort of my final point in terms of what you can do, because I think there's a lot that can happen, even from afar. I think, like, for example, I'm not present at COP30 this year, but I think I am supporting a lot of action sort of from afar. in terms of what's happening, side events that are happening and things. So I am involved in the process. I'm just not physically there. And I think there's a lot that you can do to voice sort of your concern to representatives, to push for stronger climate action, to email or message or write messages to those that you know will be present, especially if they're decision makers in country delegations. But also what's really important, to participate in democratic processes, encourage peers to vote. Unfortunately, even within sort of, European Union, there is a lack of youth voting. We are there's not enough young people that are voting, and that is an issue, and that is being reflected also in kind of what are the outcomes, what are the political changes that are happening. So there needs to be a stronger push for young people to vote. And I know it's difficult because it's hard to say, like, which there's no, maybe you'll look at something and be like, there's no party in my country that I completely agree with, and that's often the case. You have to look at which one can you support to at least uphold the rule of law, to uphold democracy, that will support climate action, and that will actually maybe even listen if you go speak to a representative. So that's important. There's so many ways that you can get involved. As Samira said, a lot of us started volunteering at something locally, or if you can nationally, volunteering with an organization to raise awareness, to be part of a youth network, or apply to become part of the European Climate Pact, or national sort of initiatives that are happening. And of course, nowadays, there's also a lot of need and opportunity to raise awareness on social media, to counter the mass amount of misinformation that is happening, and get involved at the global negotiation process through youth NGOs, through UNFCCC observer delegations, through Younger, as Samira has mentioned. So, and if your country does have youth negotiator program, which a lot of countries nowadays do, they are training young people to become young negotiators, or they have badges that they can send young people, then do that, because that gives you another step in that is beyond just sort of being an observer. It gives you another level of access to speak with your country representative, or your whatever organization sort of part of, and you can really push for change through sort of youth negotiator programs. And there's also a lot of training organization happening in terms of training young negotiators, because I think at the end of the day, what really makes a difference if we can have young people at the table discussion for our future, and not just in the consultations or behind, but who can actually be there. So I think it's really great to see countries that are doing that and that are really actively including youth, and hopefully more will do. And so if you are in a country that does that, do explore what happens, and do that early. I think usually you just have to start planning a year ahead if you want to go next year, sort of looking at what are the new opportunities that come. But that's it for me today. So,
thanks a lot, Léa.
Thanks.
Yes, indeed. This was very, very interesting, and also for all these tips. That's great. I'm just looking at time, of course, to see if we have, at least the time for one question, because indeed we would like to hear more from you. And we receive actually some questions already. So maybe we can actually reply to the second one. We can see them on the screen from Maria. So what kind of things can we contact policymakers if we are not policy experts? What would be your advice for both of you, Léa and Samira? Maybe we can start with Samira, if that's fine, and then we go to Léa.
I think as young people, sometimes it's hard to claim that we have expertise, where sometimes we do our research and we know our subject, and we do understand that, for example, for 1.5 degree, we have seen the science, we have read about it so much, that we know what is just to do. I think it's important not to diminish or fear first, and to go into the fact that we are active citizens, we have the right to be here, or citizens have the obligation to listen to us. So they have been put into this position to just respond to us first. Yeah, it's important to understand that framing when we go and reach out to them. And I think that the demands that we have are important, and whatever way you put them forward. But if you want support, that is where organizing as a coalition is extremely important. For example, for the youth dialogue that Léa had mentioned, what we did is that before in the morning, we reached an organization that is called GCE, has reached out to a lot of youth organizations from across the board. They invited them, and they invited also some of the people who will be going to that youth policy dialogue, so that we could just all brainstorm together on what we wanted to ask collectively. Some people had knowledge on COP, some people didn't, but we just sat there on the table and try to frame our general demands and fears and ideas all together. So I think that if you don't feel comfortable doing that alone, trying to reach out to other youth is extremely important to frame your ideas.
Thanks a lot, Samira. Indeed, very, very useful, very insightful. Léa, on your side?
Yeah, very quickly, I think what I would add is don't be afraid. You don't have to be an expert. You can, I think the important thing is if you root your arguments in the science, in what is out there, if you cite it, if you look at any papers that exist, if you look at the science, if you look at the reports that international organizations have put out, you can use those and say, look, the emissions gap report or the IPCC report says this. We have to be aligned to that. Or in the law, looking at what the ICJ advisory opinion says. So you can read these documents, you can take sort of your sources and back your arguments in that and bring that forward. And at the end of the day, it's not really about how you word it or what exactly is done, but you know that you have a backing. You have your arguments are centered in science or frameworks, and I think that really helps to give you a bit of an idea of how can you bring something forward. And sometimes you think, okay, maybe they already know all of this, but actually it's important that we repeat these reports and we repeat the science that is there, the reality that is happening. And if you can, maybe bring personal stories. As we said earlier, all of us at this point have some sort of personal story on climate change or what is happening in our communities and what we have experienced in our life. And I think we have to remember that at the end of the day, this isn't just about numbers. This is about lives. This is about, our stories and our future. So I think even bringing that forward is like so valuable. And of course, there's a lot of platforms. If you feel, you don't want to do this alone, that you can join a coalition, join a youth organization to work together. How can we bring this forward? Can we do if you're really into stories or artistic expression, is there a way to bring an arts exhibition forward or an arts something artistic forward? So I think there's the policy and science route that you can take, but you can also take so many different advocacy routes to highlight a point.
Thanks a lot, Léa. And it's unfortunately we need to close here. I see there are more questions coming, but in case indeed I think they can also reach out to you now if they want to know more about how to get engaged. And I'm sure that indeed Samira and Léa will also be able to reply to your question. But thanks a lot, really, to both of you. It's been very, very, very nice to hear your experience, and also thanks for sharing tips as well on how other people can also get engaged into the way to COP30 this year. Just to indeed wrap up, for this session, I would like to thank really everyone. But just a quick reminder of a few things. So first thing first, if you want to know more about Climate Pact activities and even more about how you can take climate action, don't forget to visit our website. You have the QR code on the right of the slides. And there are many things, including some events indeed that will happen at EU and national level. We will also have a debrief also on COP afterwards. So you can indeed look at the QR codes and visit our website for many more resources. Then I would also like to remind you that we will have a new Climate Action Academy webinar. This will be on AI for climate solutions. So really how to harness technology for a sustainable future. You can already scan the QR code to register. This will take place on the 16th of December. From 12:30 to 2 CAT. And you will get a clear explanation on AI, how it works, and how it can be used indeed to drive climate action, indeed. Then the next, I would also like to remind you that we do have all our courses also on the EU Academy platform. So in case you miss anything, and also this one, you can just rewatch, on the website there. So again, also here, don't forget to scan the QR codes to then enroll in the course and take also some other past orders that you may have missed. But that's very great. I think this wraps up our course on the fundamental of youth leadership. Indeed, thank you very much to all of you, especially to our speaker, Léa and Samira. Really was a pleasure. And also, of course, all the participants for your questions and for staying with us. We hope really that you appreciated the session, and we hope really to see you for the next also course. In the meantime, have a good rest of the day and see you soon for the next course. Bye, everyone.